Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. President Biden just delivered his first State of the Union address, and here are the four key takeaways from President Biden's State of the Union speech. Now, this was a very important speech because it was after a year marked by continued struggles with COVID, by the way, declining popularity for him and his fellow Democrats, and obviously Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's take a look at the four key takeaways from President Biden's first State of the Union speech. The first, and by the way, this is based on reporting from the Washington Post. We'll provide you with a link to this resource in the description section below. The first was seizing on the bipartisanship of Ukraine. Now, the Washington Post reports that one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's greatest tricks has been in uniting Republicans and Democrats behind one goal, opposing him. Now, if there's one thing the Republicans and the Democrats can agree on, that is the opposition to Vladimir Putin. And the Washington Post reports that at the start of the speech, Biden grabbed that opportunity to rally the parties behind their common cause. In fact, President Biden said this, and by the way, he received applause from both Republicans and Democrats when he said this. Members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, even Switzerland, are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. And after that, President Biden pointed to the Justice Department's move to go after Russian billionaires, as well as joint efforts with European allies to seize their assets, including yachts. President Biden said this: "Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilk billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. I mean it. We are coming for you." Pretty incredible, folks. I believe that it's excellent that President Biden is going after these corrupt dictators and these warmongers and these murderers. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. The second point was that the president started speaking Republicans' language. In other words, the president did not have a divisive speech, and he tried to rally Republicans behind him. He actually said many things that the Republicans would be happy about. And he said this: "Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing lines. Fellow Americans, look, we can't change how divided we've been, but we can change how to move forward on COVID-19 and other issues that we must face together." In fact, a small portion of his party had said defund the police, and he said we should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. And he said fund them, fund them. In fact, Republican leaders stood up and applauded. And President Biden also tackled an issue that, by the way, is bothering all of our fellow Americans. He said, I quote, "Inflation is robbing people of the gains they might otherwise feel." And he went on to call that his top priority. Now, let's move on to point number 3. The president, I think, is done with the Build Back Better plan. In fact, he didn't even mention Build Back Better in his speech. Now, the president did talk about other bills he wanted to see passed, including the Bipartisan Innovation Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and the Disclose Act, but he did not mention the Build Back Better plan. In fact, let's take a look at some video clips highlighting each of these 3 points. Let's start with the first point that I mentioned earlier, and by the way, I'll get to all 4. Let's start with the first point where the president seized on the bipartisanship of Ukraine. Let's roll the tape and see what President Biden had to say about the Russia and Ukraine situation. Let's watch.
The free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, even Switzerland, are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks in the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilked billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it.
And now let's move on to the second important segment. The president trying to bring the country together and speaking to the Republicans in their language as opposed to being divisive, unlike former President Trump. Let's roll the tape and see how the president tried to unite Republicans and Democrats behind a common cause, a shared vision for America. Let's roll the tape and watch.
Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided $350 billion that cities, states, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies. Proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers, breaking the cycle of violence and trauma, and giving young people some hope. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
And number three, this wasn't that obvious. The president abandoning, if you will, the Build Back Better plan. The president instead focusing on other things that he wanted to get done. Let's roll the tape and see the president indirectly eliminating the Build Back Better plan. Let's watch.
We meet tonight in an America that has lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. The pandemic has been punishing, and so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. I understand, like many of you did. My dad had to leave his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania to find work. So like many of you, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up, it was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. That's when one of the first things I did as president was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. Because people were hurting. We needed to act, and we did. Few pieces of legislation have done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of a crisis. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation and combat COVID-19, delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans. It helped put food on the table. Remember those long lines of cars waiting for hours just to get a box of food put in their trunk. It cut the cost of health care insurance. And as my dad used to say, it gave the people just a little bit of breathing room. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind.
And finally, folks, and this I think was the most unusual, was the most shameful, and was the most disrespectful part of the entire speech. A shouting attack from the Republican Party as President Biden talked about his dead son. Now, it was 13 years ago that a Republican congressman actually yelled, "You lie," at President Barack Obama. On Tuesday night, one of the most extreme House Republicans tried to do something similar, and she actually chose a very unfortunate and a puzzling time, and I thought it was very disrespectful for her to actually do that. President Biden was talking about his son, and President Biden actually said many of the world's finest and best trained warriors in the world were never the same. Headache, numbness, dizziness, a cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. And it was at this point that Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado chose to attack President Biden. She attacked President Biden for his chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan and said, "You put them in, 13 of them." And she was referring to his flag-draped coffin remark, even though President Biden was not talking about combat deaths. The cancer that President Biden was talking about was an obvious reference to the death of his son, Beau Biden. And by the way, these were prepared remarks that the White House had sent out earlier. So it's clear that Boebert never bothered to read those remarks. By the way, Boebert did get a bunch of boos, and President Biden continued speaking, staring in one direction as he mentioned Beau Biden in the very next sentence. These were the 4 key takeaways from President Biden's State of the Union speech. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let's actually take a look at this unfortunate incident featuring Lauren Boebert reacting to President Biden in a very petty, immature, and in a very unempathetic way. And I believe what she did was not American, because what she did was completely out of context. And folks, I believe that when our elected officials act like this, I believe they diminish themselves, they disrespect themselves, and they actually diminish our country in the eyes of the world. Let's roll the tape and look at what Boebert did and the boos that she actually elicited. You can see the reaction. People booed at her for her comments. Let's roll the tape and watch.
And our troops in Iraq in Afghanistan have faced many dangers. One being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 40 times. These burn pits that incinerate waste, the waste of war, medical and hazardous material, jet fuel, and so much more. And they come home. Many of the world's fittest and best trained warriors in the world. Never the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. 13. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Beau Biden. I don't know for sure if the burn pit that he lived near, that his hooch was near, in Iraq and earlier than that in Kosovo, is the cause of his brain cancer, the disease of so many other troops.
That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. I work hard on this channel every single day to bring you the latest news and to bring you the truth wherever the truth might lead us. Once again, please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. Also follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is ignition_time. That's ignition_time. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.